This independence movement was led by Augustins de Iturbide, who had been an officer in the Spanish army. On February 24, 1821, he published the Plan de Iluga, his vision for an independent Mexico. The plan featured a constitutional monarchy with a Mexican empire and removed the provisions of the Cadiz Constitution that Mexican elites found so threatening to their status and privileges. It received instantaneous support, and Spain quickly realized that it could not stop the inevitable. But Iturbide did not just organize Mexican succession, recognizing the power vacuum. He quickly took advantage of his military backing to have himself declared emperor, a position that the great leader of the South American independence, Simon Bolivar, described as "by the grace of God and of by nods." Iturbide was not constrained by the same political institutions that constrained presidents of the United States. He quickly made himself a dictator, and by October 1822 he had dismissed the constitutionally sanctioned Congress and replaced it with a junta of his choosing. Though Iturbide did not last long, this pattern of events was to be repeated time and time again in 19th century Mexico. The Constitution of the United States did not create a democracy by modern standards. Who could vote in elections was left up to the individual states to determine, while northern states quickly conceded the vote to all white men irrespective of how much income they earned or property they owned. Southern states did so only gradually. No state enfranchised women or slaves, and as property and wealth restrictions were lifted on white men, racial franchises explicitly disenfranchising black men were introduced. Slavery, of course, was deemed constitutional when the Constitution of the United States was written in Philadelphia, and the most sordid negotiation concerned the division of the seats in the House of Representatives among the states. These were to be allocated on the basis of the state's population, but the congressional representatives of the southern states then demanded that the slaves be counted. Northerners objected. The compromise was that in apportioning seats to the House of Representatives, a slave would count as 3/5 of the free person. Were repressed during the constitutional process as the 3/5 rule and other compromises were worked out. New fixes were added over time. For example, the Missouri Compromise, an arrangement where one pro-slavery and one anti-slavery state were always added to the Union together to keep the balance in the Senate between those for and those against slavery. These fudges kept the political institutions of the United States working peacefully until the Civil War finally resolved the conflicts in favor of the North. The Civil War was bloody and destructive, but both before and after it there were ample economic opportunities for large fraction of the population, especially in the northern and western United States. The situation in Mexico was very different. If the United States experienced 5 years of political instability between 1860 and 1865, Mexico experienced almost non-stop instability for the first 50 years of independence. This is best illustrated via the career of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Santa Anna, son of colonial official in Veracruz, came to prominence as a soldier fighting for the Spanish in the independence wars. In 1821, he switched sides with Iturbide and never looked back. He became president of Mexico for the first time in May of 1833, though he exercised power for less than a month, preferring to let Valentin Gomez Farias act as president. Gomez Farias' presidency lasted 15 days, after which Santa Anna retook power. This was as brief as his first spell, however, and he was again replaced by Gomez Farias in early July. Santa Anna and Gomez Farias continued this dance until the middle of 1835, when Santa Anna was replaced by Miguel Barragan. But Santa Anna was not a quitter. He was back as president in 1839, 1841, 1844, 1847, and finally between 1853 and 1855. In all, he was president 11 times, during which he presided over the loss of Alamo and Texas and the disastrous Mexican-American War, which led to the loss of what became New Mexico and Arizona. Between 1824 and 1867, there were 52 presidents in Mexico, few of whom assumed power according to any constitutionally sanctioned procedure. The consequence of this unprecedented political instability for economic institutions and incentives should be obvious. Such instability led to highly insecure property rights. It also led to a severe weakening of the Mexican state, which now had little authority and little ability to raise taxes or provide public services. Indeed, even though Santa Anna was president in Mexico, large parts of the country were not under his control, which enabled the annexation of taxes by the United States. In addition, as we just saw, the motivation behind the Mexican Declaration of Independence was to protect the set of economic institutions developed during the colonial period, which had made Mexico, in the words of the great German explorer and geographer of Latin America, Alexander von Humboldt, the country of inequality. These institutions, by basing the society on the exploitation of the indigenous people and the creation of monopolies, blocked the economic incentives incentives and initiatives of the great mass of the population. As the United States began to experience the Industrial Revolution in the first half of the 19th century, Mexico got poorer. Having an idea, starting a firm, and getting a loan. The Industrial Revolution started in England. Its first success was to revolutionize the production of cotton cloth using new machines powered by water wheels and later by steam engines. Mechanization of cotton production massively increased the productivity of workers in first textiles and subsequently other industries. The engine of technological breakthroughs throughout the economy was innovation, spearheaded by new entrepreneurs and businessmen eager to apply their new ideas. This initial flowering soon spread across the North Atlantic to the United States. People saw the great economic opportunities available in adopting the new technological development in England. They were also inspired to develop their own inventions. We can try to understand the nature of these inventions by looking at who was granted patents. The patent system, which protects property rights in ideas, was systemized in the Statute of Monopolies legislated by the English Parliament in 1623, partially as an attempt to stop the king from arbitrarily granting patents to whoever he wanted. Effectively granted exclusive rights to undertake certain activities or businesses. The striking thing about the evidence on patenting in the United States is that people who were granted patents came from all sorts of backgrounds and all walks of life, not just the rich and the elite. Many made fortune based on their patents. Take Thomas Edison, the inventor of the phonograph and the light bulb and the founder of the General Electric, still one of the world's largest companies. Edison was the last of 7 children. His father, Samuel Edison, followed many occupations from splitting shingles for roof to tailoring to keep the tavern. Thomas had little formal schooling but was homeschooled by his mother. Between 1820 and 1845, only 19% of patentees in the United States had parents who were professionals or were from recognizable major land-owning families. During the same period, 40% of those who took out patents had only primary schooling or less. create banking monopolies, which they could give to their friends and partners in exchange for part of the monopoly profits. The bank also quickly got into the business of lending money to the politicians who regulated them, just as in Mexico, but this situation was not suitable in the United States because the politicians who attempted to create these banking monopolies, unlike their Mexican counterparts, were subject to election and re-election. Creating banking monopolies and giving loans to politicians is good business for politicians if they can get away with it. It is not particularly good for the citizens. However, unlike in Mexico, in United States, the citizens could keep politicians in check and get rid of ones who would use their offices to enrich themselves or create monopolies for their cronies. In consequence, the banking monopolies crumbled. The broad distribution of political rights in the United States, especially when compared to Mexico, guaranteed equal access to finance and loans. This, in turn, ensured that those with ideas and inventions could benefit from them. Path dependent chain. Path dependent change. The world was changing in the 1870 and 80s.